Hey, folks, welcome to the Wrench Turners podcast, a show that's about improving the life, well being, and productivity of mechanics everywhere. On today's show, we've got a great individual that spent quite a bit of time in parts and now has moved into service. This individual, Freddy, has been part of the STL family for a long time. He's the service manager of the International Autos Group. You can find out all of the information about him on LinkedIn. I'm going to make sure that I link it in the post on LinkedIn. If you just happen to be cruising on YouTube to find this, that's where you find it. And before we start, I'm going to read something that he wrote to me. You know, as some of you may understand, that I ask all of my guests to write a very brief bio and a very brief list of achievements so that I can make the slide deck that I post on LinkedIn. But Freddy did a little bit more, and I couldn't fit everything on the slide deck. So I left something off, and I left the most important thing off the slide deck. And let me read it to you now. I thank God every day for all my blessings. I'm not perfect by any means. Only He can take this broken man that I see in the mirror every day and make him brand new every morning. Every day, I have the chance to impact someone else's life in a positive way, and I may not even know I did it. This is what motivates me to keep going and to continuously improve personally and professionally. Each interaction with someone else is a blessing. Love your neighbor as he loves us. Just take a minute and soak that in, folks. Just take a minute, soak that in before we jump into this episode, because it's profound. No, Freddy, you are not broken. You are living life like the rest of us. And we appreciate you. Appreciate you giving all of yourself to us, that we get to listen and share your life experiences. And on that note, folks, let's get into it.
All right. So how did I get into automotive? Yeah, like a lot of people, I had a dream of working long shifts, bell to bell, 40 hours plus a week, dying inside, not taking a lunch. I had all of those visions when I was very young. No, it was nothing like that. I was actually dragged into a aftermarket mom and pop kind of chain automotive parts store by a friend in high school. A friend I've recently connected with, his name is Frank. And when I started there, I didn't even know what an oil filter was. I didn't know anything. I came into a job, I was like a part time cashier kind of thing. And eventually, a lot of people quit, as a lot of people do in minimum wage jobs. And I was kind of one of the most senior people there. So, like, well, we need you to work the back counter. I can't even look up an oil filter. I can't look up a brake pad, So all of a sudden, I was a parts guy by default. So that's where I started. I learned a catalog very quickly, but I couldn't tell you, the rotors and brake pads go together. I didn't know that. But that kind of started something, and I started learning knowledge, and I started working on my own cars. I went to automotive school. I'm a graduate of Lincoln Tech, for what that's worth. Um, but yeah, it started off. I became a parts manager later on, again by default, because the manager also quit. So all of a sudden, I was a nighttime manager. And that's pretty much what rocketed since. So I worked for a couple of automotive chains, you name it. I've worked for, Trek Auto. I worked for AutoZone. I worked for Advance, and eventually made my way into a small Nissan dealership, where I pretty much got my dealership start as a parts counter, then wholesale counter, and then I worked my way up to management. Uh, so I did dealership parts for about a good 15 years. And now I'm currently dabbling into service, which is a whole nother leap all in itself.
So you got in because you were forced into it because you like working long hours, and then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
worked in.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah, we all like working. It seems to be a common trend. The majority of us that stay in automotive for a long time, we like pain. I think that's the fundamental
That's
thing is we enjoy pain.
yes. We're just sick in the head.
Pain ends up, as long as there's a paycheck though, as long as there's a paycheck
Yes,
associated that is comparable to the pain level, we're good to go. If
yes,
the paycheck is better than the pain level, even better, even better.
yes,
Um,
yes.
I've always said that even before I went to the desk, even before I left the bench and got on the desk as a service advisor, I've always said that service advisor is the hardest job in fixed
Yes,
ops. It's the
I
hardest
do
job in
fully
fixed
agree with
ops.
that.
Um, the second hardest job being a technician, because of liability reasons and responsibility of people's lives. And the third hardest job is parts manager. And the reason being is you get usually the lowest pay per responsibility point as parts manager. That's
Yeah,
personal opinion based on experience, and it's not necessarily a hard job. And I have never experienced being a parts manager or parts managers that ever had a hard job, because typically, not all of them, but typically they are the folks that come in for 8 o'clock, they go home at 5 o'clock, they take their 1 hour lunch, they take their 15-minute breaks, they work inside that line, and for whatever reason they have figured out how to do that seamlessly with low stress and low anxiety for the most part. Now it's the top 5% that usually have high stress and high anxiety, because they're the ones that are doubling and tripling their ability to do wholesale. They're doubling and tripling their retail. They're investing time, energy, and effort to super high push on the technician teams to make sure that they're getting everything they need. Like it's ready, it's ready, it's ready. We got buckets ready, we got parts ready, we got this ready. We're booked, 10 days out booked in service. I know I have parts that's going to be here on day 2 days before the car arrives, so that it comes in, it goes out, it's sailed. My obsolescence is like, that's the super high level one. But the other
yep.
95% somehow manage just well at humming along. And I know I'm going to get flack for that, but
No, no, not at all. I argue with those guys. I fight with those guys all day long. I fight with them on Facebook. I fight with them, obviously person to person. I've worked with those guys. I fired some of those guys. Um, I
it's
definitely don't. Yeah,
it's a big challenge, I think, for everybody in service to understand what is required to be, because there are parts managers out there, in my experience, that don't get it. They just
right.
they don't get it. They don't understand that they have to look at forecasting to try and predict what their business in parts is going to be like in 6, 9, 12, 18 months. They don't get that they have to look at the last 18 months to understand how to look at the next 18 months. They don't look at technicians as a valuable asset to their business in order to succeed. Then there's those that do get it, but don't necessarily know how to implement it, because they themselves were
Yeah,
brought up in a department where you had that manager that didn't get it, so they haven't learned.
right.
And there's so few parts managers, in my experience, that do get it, that they're not teaching, because it's very not like technicians, we're born into a trade. It is fundamental as part of a trade that it is journeyman and apprentice. An apprentice finds someone who will teach them, they will teach
Yep.
them, and they grow. Parts people don't seem to have that. It's you come in as
No.
a clerk that knows nothing about the industry, nothing about the business, nothing about what to do, and the person that's leading you is the same person, but they've never got any instruction, never got any education or training
Never.
or any know-how. So it's the blind leading the blind. Even if they want to do well, it's the blind leading the blind for the most part. And until you get people like yourself who've been around the block in lots of different business, lots of different leadership roles to go, hey, these are the things we need to do to be successful. Or you get, people like Joe Chambers, you get Michael Barrich, who's like, these are the things that we need to look at forecasting. How are you in parts helping us? And they pull them up. Does that make sense? Is that what you're
Absolutely. Yeah, because most parts managers, again, they get thrown into position. Most parts countermen get thrown into position. Hey, they were a porter once. Hey, you're working parts counter now. Okay, well, what do I do? Just just follow my lead or whatever, and then the guy quits on you. That never happens.
That never
Um,
happens. The long hours
I
and
don't
low pay in parts.
exactly, exactly. But yeah, that's another thing is I mean, parts guys are some of the most unappreciated guys. It can get stressful back there. I'm not saying it's the worst job in the world, but I mean, there's definitely moments where you're shorthanded, or you're putting up with a lot, or you're, as a parts manager, you're arguing with your service manager about pricing and discounts. Those discussions happen, but most of the time, the parts manager has never had any formal training, has never had any mentor or coaching. Probably can't tell you, what he should be looking at, what metrics he should be looking at. Should he be looking at, what does his obsolescence look like, and how does he know how to track that? How does he know to be looking at, what's over 9 months? How does he know to be looking at, 30 days? What's still sitting on your shelf, your SOP shelf? You brought it in for a customer that service hasn't brought in for their appointment. Why isn't he tracking that kind of stuff? And he doesn't know to be looking at that. He doesn't know to be looking at his gross profit, not only, on his retail and wholesale, but also in his service. Is he making enough gross profit through the service department? And if
Mm-hmm.
he's not, why is he not making enough gross? Why is he not having that discussion with his service manager? You know, there's huge barriers between parts and service. That's one of the biggest things that I'm a part of. Just breaking down those walls. Have a discussion with your service manager. He's not your enemy. You can't sit in his office or he sit in your office and be arguing all the time. You are going to argue, absolutely, just like any relationship. You're going to argue, but in order to move forward, you have to learn how to argue. You have to learn how to discuss. You have to learn what values he or she has that relate to you and that you can help them in their values and vice versa. But yeah, most parts guys don't even know where to begin. They don't know to be, you know, depending on your DMS, whatever you want to call it, your stocking groups or your sources, Reynolds
Mm-hmm.
and Reynolds CDK. You don't know that you should be separating your parts by type.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody tells you, oh, it's everything's done under the common one I see is test or non-stocking, or somebody's got some kind of acronym in parts, and everything goes in there. No, you absolutely need a system that tells you what your parts are looking like, and it's easier to track things and find out where the problems are once you have a system going. But nobody knows where to begin. Nobody knows where to
No,
start.
it's hard. Like you talk about being able to discern parts types and sources. Like if you happen to be a parts manager out there, listen to this right now, or a parts advisor out there, listen right now, and you're struggling trying to get all this stuff done. Like you want to succeed, you want to better understand, you want to spend more time on the business, not in the business. As a parts manager, there are tools and resources out there for you. Like for a great example is Kaylee Filio at Parts Edge, a great way to delegate some of your time as a parts manager so that you know your business is running better and excelling, so you can spend time on forecasting, so you can spend time on what your history is like, what your SOPs doing, like you were saying, Freddie. If you need a way to spend more time on the business, you need to find tools and resources and people to help you do that. That includes
Yeah,
hiring better people.
yeah,
I say this to mechanics all the time, and I say it on the podcast as often as I possibly can. The most important thing that you need to do as a technician is find a high value leader. In
yeah,
part, if you're a parts advisor, the most important thing you need to do is find a high value leader, because they're going to teach you things, they're going to show you things, they're going to show you policies and processes that you can learn to upskill and better deploy yourself on the team. Because a high value leader in parts helps everybody, just like a high value leader in service helps everybody,
absolutely.
right? And it's crazy, absolutely crazy what can happen in a department when you have a high value leader. You get somebody who's just humming along, clocking in, clocking out 8 to 5, who doesn't care about what the team is really doing. They're doing the functions of their job. Like Joe loves to say, it's a function of management. They're functioning as management. That's
Yeah,
about it. They
yes,
can say to their boss, they can say to the fixed ops director, it's like, yep, we have obsolescence. This is how much it is. We reduced it by 5% year over year. And a fixed ops, it's like, okay, well, that's doing his job. That's doing her
hey,
job.
I checked all the boxes today.
I
All
checked all the
right.
boxes today. I'm going home. And
Yeah,
but the
and
difference
that's it.
being Like when you get a parts manager who's like, okay, we've got $120,000 of coming in brand new, first 90 days. I've got $120,000 obsolescence. How do we get that to 60? And how do we get that to 60 in 90 days? Those are the people that make massive differences, because that obsolescence is just literally $60,000 of inventory that you're not doing anything with. It's 60,000. How much money can you make with that $60,000 of parts? What can you do with it? Can you work with the service manager to create policies, processes, and maybe even services to say, hey, I've got a 15-year-old part, but I've got 15 of them that fits a GMC Sierra in this window. Let's do a canvas to our customers who own that vehicle to do this service, like something like that.
Yeah.
But having the mental capacity and the mental drive to go, okay, this is what we're going to do going forward. This is how we're going to solve this situation. What is a situation similar to that, Freddie, that you've been in?
So I inherently have this sickness in the head, and I usually end up at dealerships that are struggling, that have an inventory problem, and I kind of come in there and I fix it. But previous guys have tried and struggled and haven't been able to figure out. One of the things that I discuss when I'm sitting down with, GMs or dealer principals, service managers, when I'm sitting down with them, they're thinking, oh, parts has a big problem. Okay, well, how did you explain it? How did you dissect it? When we're going into variable side, when we're talking about used cars and we're talking about idle capital is where they gets it, because when we're talking about the variable side, you know, a used car that sits for like 14 days, that's terrible. You're like, why hasn't this car turned around? Why is this car still on the lot? What's going on? Then you're starting to find out, what is going on with this car? Was it a bad investment? Did we turn this one around? This one, has it even been, UCI process in your service department? What's going on? Why do we still have this car? You know, red flags start going up. Everybody makes a big deal of it because they're thinking about the dollar value of this vehicle that's sitting on their lot, that they're not getting any return on investment. It's the same thing in the parts department. When you're talking about, idle capital in the parts department, you're talking about, your 9-month inventory, your 12-month inventory. You got idle capital. Parts department, depending on the size of your department, you're talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars of, idle, hopefully not idle capital, but you're responsible for this. If you think about it as a blank check, you're
Mm-hmm.
responsible for $100,000, $300,000, $1 million if you're in a high volume dealership. Whatever it is, what does your idle capital look like? And why aren't you having the discussion about, hey, you've been sitting in this for way too long. You've actually invested more in having it sit on your shelf than what you've gotten, getting it off the shelf, writing it off, what have you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, retaining it is just costing you so much year over year. I mean, there's dealerships out there that they don't do anything with it. They just leave it on the shelf. Then all of a sudden you've got, 24 months, idle capital. Get rid of it. That is holding you back. Those are dollars you can't invest in something, that would be beneficial to the dealership. Just like in the used car department, if a vehicle sits for too long, they get rid of it. It goes to the auction, it goes wholesale, they get rid of it. They know to get rid of it, but
Mm-hmm.
nobody takes that kind of seriousness in the parts department. They just continue to sit on it and rotate it, and you're just going to continue to crush yourself from the inside. Get rid of it. It is doing you absolutely no favors by sitting on your shelf, except for holding on to those dollars and making your inventory look terrible.
Exactly. And it's interesting. Sometimes it's a blessing though. And this is where I'll throw a complete devil's advocate for those that they're holding on
All
and
right.
hoarding parts. So I was working on a 1996 ZX11R, okay? Kawasaki ZX11, 1996. This bike sat in my owner's showroom since 96. Okay. The individual bought it in 96. It has the PDI mileage on it. So it's like 4 kilometers or so forth.
Okay.
So the owner has stored it at our facility for that long. We're talking 26, 27 years. Decided to sell it. So it's sat in the showroom. It's had the tires reinflated several times over the course. So you can imagine how donut those tires are. So we did we did repairs on it to get it roadworthy, because obviously dry rot has set in on the tires and brake fluid and so on. So we've done some repairs and stuff on it to get it back up. So my partner in crime, my baymate, took the fuel tank off to check everything out, check spark plugs, check the filter. And of course, he picked up the air filter, and the air filters on this thing is just basically foam. He picks it up, and it literally disintegrates in his hand.
Oh.
Absolutely disintegrates in his hand into nothingness. And we're looking at each other. This is a 27-year-old bike, and the customer wants it end of day. What do we do? And of course,
All the questions, yeah.
all the questions. So obviously, the owner was a Cowie dealer back in '96. They're no longer a Cowie dealer, but the owner goes to the back parts counter, to the back wall, to where all the Cowie parts used to live on a regular basis, and on the top shelf, on the very, very top shelf, pulls the slim box off, blows all the dust off, and here we have a brand new, sealed in a vacuum sealed with oiled air filter from 1996.
Oh
And
man.
so had to look up what the current what the value is, and look it up and priced out. But there are those times where that
Yeah,
becomes like, had it.
right.
But how much money did that air filter actually cost for sitting on the
Exactly,
shelf for
exactly. And
27
you feel
years?
like he feels like the hero. Yeah, you know what? I happen to have one of those. He knows exactly where it's at. He knows
Yeah,
probably how long it's been sitting there. Yeah, he dusted off the box. Oh, look, it's still in the plastic on the inside or what have you. But
yeah.
he feels like the hero. Like, why do you have that? Yes, okay, yes, you absolutely saved the day this time. But
Uh-huh.
why do you have that?
So it's those stories from the good parts managers,
Yeah,
that we all have, the ones that hold on to things and hoard things. So we might need it one day. Well, it's one
yeah,
thing to have one. It's one thing to
yeah.
have one. Like,
Sure.
there was only one of these air filters on the shelf. There isn't 10, right? There isn't 20 or 30.
No.
It's
Yeah.
one. We can somewhat let that slide, especially on a bike that back in the day, that air filter fit. I think that air filter fit like 5 or 6 different bikes. So I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah.
But
Every parts manager, even the good ones, have whatever you want to call it, a drawer, a
mm-hmm,
shelf, a plastic bin, a tote.
mm-hmm,
They've got something up their sleeve that because they know what they've got. They've got a handful of parts. And again, yeah, I'll let that slide as well because everybody's got one. I'm
mm-hmm,
guilty of that myself. Everybody's got something that was super popular once upon a time.
mm-hmm.
Not so much now, but you know what's coming. But at the same time, that should not occupy the majority of your space. If it's
No.
filling your office or filling your storage area, or what should be your receiving area, that no bueno. That's no good.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's an awesome backstory there. A little bit of obsolescence and some learning in there. So what is it that's kept you in? As we talked about your beginning. We talked about your story thus far. We talked to and so forth. What's your piece of advice? It can be for parts managers, but I'd love to hear what your piece of advice that you've learned that you'd give to technicians over the last many years.
So one of the amazing things I've talked with so many technicians over the years. One of the things that they don't get it because they're not a customer facing employee. For the most part, once in a while they'll say hi to a customer, whatever. But the majority of technicians are not customer facing employees. One of the things that I tell them is, yes, you've got a service advisor going out there, selling stuff for the vehicle, selling the repairs, but technicians are the ones actually doing the work. The technicians are the ones that actually put care into the vehicle. A technician can do either a really great job or a terrible job if they're not trying. But I try to encourage every technician absolutely put care into the vehicle like it was your own vehicle. You know, use fender covers and don't put handprints all over the car or anything like that. But if the customer knows that they're getting quality repairs every time, they're going to keep coming back.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to keep coming back. They're going to keep seeing you. They're going to know even if they don't interact with you, their paperwork has your name on it as a technician. they're going to know, hey, Steve works on my car, Al works on my car, whoever it is, they're going to know, hey, this is a really good mechanic. This is a good technician. I'm going to continue to keep coming here because, he found some stuff on my car that I didn't know about. I was going to, Jiffy Lube or Midas or whatever. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
tell me anything about this on my car, so, telling me that, oh, I'm going on a road trip and, you found that noise, the ball joint, whatever I needed, you know, and I'm going to keep coming to you because I have that trust in you. So as a technician, put that care into the customer's vehicles. You'd be surprised how many customers, request the same technician over and over again. Oh yeah, this guy, he fixed my car real nice last time. I want him to work on my car.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that technicians can take back with them is, knowing that they put hard work and care into somebody's car. It gives you the warm and fuzzies. If they know that the customer said thank you, which is another thing that advisors and managers don't always communicate to the techs. Oh, this guy was really excited and he was really happy with the service. Tell your techs that. Make them a part of that. Everybody likes knowing that they do a good job, but being a good person is part of it. Tell them the customer said really great things about them. Customers continue, customers asking for you. Technicians love that stuff, and that's not always communicated.
No, and I think it gets lost in a bit of the translation from both sides of the coin. One, absolutely agree. If technicians want to improve their surroundings, improve their working environment, improve, how they're communicated to, the best way to do that is to level up your own service, right? Make sure
Yeah.
that if you're in a place that happens to not detail the cars or not wash the cars after you touch it, make sure you're the one going over make sure you look at the steering wheel, look at the shift knob, look at the door sills, look at the outside door handle, look at the hood around the edges. Make sure you don't have any fingerprints anywhere. Make sure you don't have any footprints anywhere. Be meticulous when you put the floor mats down and the plastics on so
Yeah.
that you're not touching anything that you're not supposed to, especially if it's a white interior.
Yo,
Ladies and
man.
gentlemen, I cannot tell you how many times as a service leader or somebody working around service with technicians, when I wasn't technicians, how much more I noticed the tiny little insignificant black marks that y'all leave when you're not paying attention when you get out of the car.
Yeah.
Because the biggest one, the biggest one that I saw the most often that we leave as technicians is the tiny mark from the edge of our boots as we push to get out of the car. Right?
Yes.
We know there is a paper mat on the floor. That's awesome. But what happens is when we put our 180, 200, 240 pounds of energy through a angled piece on steel-toed boots that's covered in grease, we rip the paper, go right through the paper and onto the mat. And if that happens to be a light brown or a white interior, that thing stands out like a sore thumb. And you'll never know you did it because then the paper moves slightly and covers up the mark.
Yeah. You're right on that. Yeah.
Right? So then we go back, and then somebody will say later, it's like, "Hey, you left the grease all over the car." And meanwhile, it's one mark,
One little
but you
speck
left
all over
grease
the
all
car.
over the car. Blah 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 blah. And it's like I didn't leave. Like I had plastic everywhere. I had paper down. What's going on? And lo and behold, that was less. So do a double take. Look back. If you've already done the once over, take the stuff out of the car and look. Take the plastic and take the paper out of the car. So then you could look and say, crap. Okay. Wipe, 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 wipe. All good to go.
Yep.
All good to go.
Yep.
So that's awesome. And then the second point of that is that you made is leadership or service advisors or porters communicating gratitude from the customer to the tech. That's super
Absolutely.
huge. Not all of us require constant validation because that's a thing, that's an insecurity thing that we need to learn.
Mhm.
Much of men don't do well without validation, and some of us never receive the kind of validation and appreciation that we deserve, so we seek it often. I'm finding as I learn about myself especially, but as I read more and learn more. But it's one thing to say it's validate, and then this is where I've had a couple of service leaders approach me on it. I don't want to have to validate a good job every time a good job is done by a technician in service. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is communicating from the customer to the technician. If a customer says, please thank the technician for a service, I'm so happy about the service the technician gave me, make damn sure that you communicate
Yeah.
that, because that doesn't happen that often. So when it
No.
does happen, it's not leadership saying good job, it's the customer saying good job.
Right.
That's monumental. Monumental.
Yes. I fully agree. Yes. Yes. Tell them. Make sure that they know. Make sure that they get, they get that thanks for the customer, because yeah, I mean technicians, they're stressed out too. I got 5 waiters and I am done, and you're my only mechanic, you're my only technician,
Mm-hmm.
those days happen. But yeah, I mean, when you get a simple thank you, I mean, watching the guys in the shop just light up, it's it means a lot to so many people, especially in
Mm-hmm.
this business.
Yep. And you go a step further, you get when you have an opportunity to have a customer directly thank a technician, and it's not always appropriate, because sometimes you're in a process that you are coaching the technician on how to speak to customers, because there is a defined line that most leaders, good leaders, can say this individual should not be talking to customers yet. I
Okay.
have to say yet,
Yeah,
because
yet. Yeah, I like
everybody
that.
every technician can be coached to a point where they are professional and proper in front of customer. They may not be at that level yet, but say, hey, if you as a leader know, you should be communicating that to your technicians, like, hey, I want you to know that I want you to have the abilities and skill sets to be able to talk to customers. We're going to be onboarding video MPIs. I want you to speak more clearly, more communicate more clearly, be more professional in the way that the business wants you to execute on this. Let's do, once a week, we'll do 10 minutes of role play once a week. Let's do that so we can get your communication level up, so I can have you in front of customers more often, so you can understand better what's going on, so they can communicate to you better. That way we can alleviate or remove the service advisor from that story. They don't need to be middlemen when you have a question. If the customer is there in the waiting room talking about a noise, talk to the customer. You don't need the advisor there. The advisor's got 15 calls to make, and he's got a drive-through to service. They don't need to be there. That's when you can have the technician there. But if you haven't coached them through that process and coached them in their communication, that's going to be a problem, and that's going to be a barrier. The last thing we need in service are barriers to customer experience. So
Oh man.
that's awesome. I appreciate that. Freddie, it's been awesome. Thank you very much for your time, good sir.
It's amazing to be sharing experiences with other like-minded leaders. It's awesome. It doesn't matter where you come from. You've got an idea, and I'm happy that people are willing to share that kind of information. And thank you for, just doing this and just being a part of that as well. Thank you for being a mentor to me. It means a lot. I appreciate that.
I appreciate that very much, Freddie. I really do. And that is really the ultimate goal when I started this. We're going on a while now. So when I started this way back, it was just to give ultimately perspective from the shop floor. Like, there's not a whole lot of perspective out there from the
No.
shop floor, and the stuff that is out there is mostly negative. There's a whole lot of positive. There's a whole lot of positive that can come from being a technician. There's a whole lot of positive that can come from what we output in terms of the business. We can grow as a community, just trying to get the awareness out there that there's a lot of other great leaders out there trying to do the same thing from each perspective of service.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need more Josh Taylors. We need more, technicians and dispatchers, to speak up,
I think we
let us
need more
know, hey,
Freddie. We need more Freddies out there that got into automotive because they like the long hours, the low pay, and then the lack of lunches.
I tell you, it's a luxurious lifestyle. Somebody should try it. There are days you bring your lunch to work even, and it just sits there, cold in a corner because you probably don't have a fridge, just sitting there stale. That's a great life. That's my advertisement to anybody wants to get an automotive. Come on
Yes.
in. We have yeah, lack of lunches and long hours. It's lovely.
All right, that's awesome.
Oh,
Almost forgot the bloopers. Check it out.
Alrighty. So, Freddy, let's try it again, buddy. Let's try it again. All right.
Take 19.
Take
Action.
Take 2319. 23. Freddy.
2319. I love it already.
Oh no, wrenches! That's the end of another episode. But you know, there's going to be another one coming next week. I appreciate you all for tuning in and watching on Spotify and on YouTube, growing the channel and spreading the word, the good word, to the eyes and the ears of every mechanic we can possibly help. Folks, I really hope you enjoyed this episode and subscribe. And before we leave today, a quote as normal, but this one a little bit different, a little bit off my normal base. Paul tells us, God is faithful, and he will not let you be tested beyond your strength. But with your testing, he will also provide the way so that you may be able to endure it. Remember, folks, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.